Welcome back to the Tool Crib. Today we're going to be looking at the Gerber Diesel multiplier. Now, I don't own a lot of Gerbers, and one of my viewers was kind enough to send this to me to review it, and I want to say a special thanks to him, and I really appreciate it, sir, for you sending this multi-tool for me for us to check out. I inherently am not a huge fan of the OTF or out the front plier design that Gerber incorporates in a lot of their multi-tools. And the reason is kind of two or threefold, actually. First and foremost, I don't care for the looseness or the rattling in pliers that you'll get sometimes with these multi-tools because of the way they're designed. They have to be somewhat loose in order to allow that slide mechanism to work properly. The second reason is it sort of limits the interior implements, the length on them. And what I mean by that is we'll just pull in a Charge Plus here real quick. This is a Charge Plus with G10 handle scales, and we'll just take a look at just one implement, just the knife blade. And you can see that even though this is a smaller framed multi-tool, it has just as long as a knife blade as the Diesel. That's going to be true of most all the regular implements too. I think that I feel like the screwdrivers and stuff are a little bit lacking in these style frames. Now, the last reason that I don't care for an OTF for myself personally is because in a OTF plier design, they have to keep them pretty slim here. Otherwise, when they close them up, the pliers, when they close down or slide the pliers in, if they had a wider stance, then they wouldn't close properly, or they'd be very wide out here at the back. They would kind of maintain that overall width. So for me, I like the butterfly style, and the reason, well, several reasons, but another reason is because it has a wider stance when it's in its closed position, and it just feels like a more proper pair of pliers to me. These OTF designs, they get really narrow here. Now the Diesel's not too bad. The Diesel actually has a pretty decent stance back here, and you don't have any contact points on the inside, so even if you were to grab onto something and slip off, you shouldn't pinch your hand on anything in the Diesel. So that's one plus to this particular multi-tool, but others of this particular style sometimes can get a little close back there. Well, let's take a little better look at the Gerber Diesel. First, we're going to get into the specs real quick, and then we're going to walk through the tool set and kind of give you my thoughts on what I see and what I think about the Diesel. Now, mind you, this is not my multi-tool, so I am not going to put it through anything strenuous. I don't want to damage it in any way for obvious reasons. So let's get into the specs first, and then we will get through the tool set. The weight on the Diesel is actually pretty good at 8.57 ounces, or about 241 grams. The overall length in its closed position is pretty long, actually. It's 4 7/8 of an inch because the pliers stick out a little further than the actual housing of the multi-tool, the actual frame of the multi-tool. So 4 7/8 of an inch long, or 123 millimeters. Its overall width at the widest point is 1 5/8, or about 41 millimeters, and its depth is 3/4 of an inch. So that's about what you get in the Surge for overall width. So it's on the high side of what multi-tools on the market are for the most part. I think the only one that's really wider than that I can think of right now is the Gerber Center Drive, is a little bit wider than that. Well, let's get into the tool set of the Gerber Diesel. The first thing that we're going to look at on the Diesel are the pliers, and the pliers on here come down to a pretty fair needle nose point. They're pretty precise, actually. They could have ground them just a little bit more if they wanted to get them a little bit more precise, but that kind of take away from the strength. Now, on the whole, they appear to be fairly robust as well. The pattern on the teeth there, you can see it doesn't bring that tooth pattern all the way to the end. It has more of a flat spot out here, so you have that point there on the end, about 1/8 of an inch, maybe a touch more, where it's flat there to grab on the stuff, and then you have the teeth on the remaining portion of the needle nose. Then you have your regular pliers here, and then wire cutters. It doesn't really, there is a slight notch for hard wire cutting. Now, upon looking at the Diesel, one of the things I thought I was going to like initially was the fact that it has a much longer wire cutting area than some other multi-tools. About the only thing that I'm going to test this on is like soft wire. So I tried it, and unfortunately I was a little disappointed. Now, most Gerber multi-tools that come with this with the non-replaceable cutters are actually made pretty decently. However, this one, while it cuts wire okay, you can see that it kind of pinches. It doesn't really cut through it all the way, and it left a little bit there. So I was a little disappointed in that. If we get it a little further down, closer to the fulcrum, we'll see how it performs. And it's pretty much the same thing. I tried to go a little higher up on it, and everywhere I did, it just did not cut the wire very well. Now, for comparison, I have an MP600, which is a very similar design, but it has a much shorter wire cutting area. And these seem to outperform the Diesel quite a bit. And I'm not really sure why that is, because overall they have very similar designs as far as the pliers go, especially when you're talking about the cutters, the angle of the cutters, and the relief behind the cutters as well. Also, you'll notice it may be a little bit difficult to see, but the cutters themselves actually are ground in a little bit of an arch. And I thought that would lend itself to make it in better cutters, but unfortunately they just don't cut soft wire very well. Now, you'll notice on the back of the plier, excuse me, on the back of the pliers are actually pretty intricate. They have several different pieces that allow them to be put together, as opposed to being one solid unit. They have this instead of the pliers being forged or cast in one single unit, they have the spacers that go on the outside of the pliers, and then those appears to be riveted to the plier head themselves. Now, that is part of your slide mechanism, where these screws will actually screw down into that slide mechanism, which allow it to function. I think I would rather see that in a full one piece, but that's what we get in, and this is prevalent in a lot of other Gerbers as well. This is not something that's exclusive to the Diesel. Now, one thing I do like about the Diesel is I was talking earlier about how I like, I don't necessarily care for OTF pliers because they don't offer a wide enough stance. I would like it so that when it's in its closed position, it's out here. But I will say that the Diesel is not bad compared to some other OTF plier designs that I've used in the past. It's not great, but it's not bad either. I really would like to see them. And it's just going to be something that you're going to have to contend with this type of design. And the same thing with the Leatherman. With the Leatherman one-hand tool, it's exactly the same thing, where it just does not have a very wide stance. And for me, it feels uncomfortable. And maybe that's more because I'm unaccustomed to it. Well, we'll start with the interior tools. And on the first one is a saw blade. Now, the saw blade on here is very thick. I don't know how well that's going to function as a saw blade. Of course, not having used it, it has a decent tooth pattern on there, and they're very sharp. But most saw blades I've seen on multi-tools are quite a bit thinner than this one. Now, it may cut just fine. I don't know, and this is not something I'm going to be able to test out on this Gerber. The next tools, well, let's see if we can get that mechanism to work there. The next tools, let's just try to pull the interior tools out here real quick. Well, if I can get that little lanyard loop to come. There she goes. So the first one is a very interesting can opener design, and I'm not sure if this doubles as their bottle opener too. Most of these style can openers, like you're going to get with a Leatherman, are going to have more of a sweeping arch. They're going to come down more to a point here. This probably works, but I don't know how well it would work. The design here seems a little strange to me, but that does not mean that it will not function correctly. And then next to that, we have a 1/4 inch you know, the screwdriver on here, though the tool on it kind of looks funky, and no, that would not double as the bottle opener, by the way, because obviously we have the bottle opener here. That bottle opener looks like it'd work pretty well, though. I've noticed with other multi-tools, especially like the reason that the P4 and the P2, their bottle opener works better than something like the Wave or the Charge, is because they have quite a bit thicker steel here on the back, and it's just easier to get on that little rib of the bottle caps. So I think this bottle cap lifter would work pretty well, actually, because it also is a bit made out of a bit thicker steel here on the back, where on the Wave and the Charge, the type of can opener and bottle opener that they use there has a pretty thin profile on the back by comparison. They still work, it's noticeable like the P4 and the P2 work a little better. While this whole unit is pretty funky looking, I think that screwdriver is going to work okay, and they did a pretty nice job on that screwdriver too. Then next to that is the integrated lanyard loop. That's pretty robust, actually. The next tool over is the one I really like on this Diesel, though. So Fiskars, which owns Gerber, they make really good scissors. And the problem is on a lot of their multi-tools, their scissors seem to be a bit lacking. But on this Diesel, and there's a couple other models that have this similar design. You notice that the back handle is quite a bit longer than some of the others that I've tested in the past, especially like the Center Drive. The Center Drive the Center Drive Plus, excuse me, has really bad scissors on it. And it's not that the scissors themselves are bad, it's that they're not very ergonomic, because they don't have a very long back handle here. And so when you're using them, it puts there's a pressure point on your thumb, and it kind of hurts sometimes if you're trying to get through something like paracord. So I've got a little piece of paracord here, and we're just going to try those scissors out real quick. And those are quite nice. Those are really quite good. I'm actually kind of really impressed with these scissors, how well they function. So it's just going through that paracord like nothing, over and over again. Those are impressive. I wish that Gerber put this style of scissors on more of their multi-tools. I like the fact that when you swing it out, it comes out wider than the handle here. I mean, it's really nice. They really work well. This is definitely one positive to the Diesel. Now, if we get around to the other side, the next thing we're going to look at is the knife blade. And this is a combo blade, which if you've watched some of my other videos, you'll know I'm not a huge fan of. This is a different style of knife, though, that has a very sharp point on here. That is an interesting design. Now, it has a very thick spine on this knife, too, so I think it's pretty strong. The front portion here is about an inch, maybe a little bit more, maybe just slightly more than an inch in overall length for the standard blade. Now, the blade length on this overall is 2 5/16 of an inch if you're measuring on the cutting edge, and that equates to about 59 millimeters. I haven't seen many serrated patterns that are like this, though. That is really different. You can see if we can get a little closer look at how that pattern is on that serrated blade. And I'm going to try that real quick just on a little piece of that same paracord and see just how sharp this is. Oh yeah, that blade is actually pretty sharp. We'll just get it up here on the front, and you can see there shouldn't be any problem with that blade. Now, it's a little shorter than what I normally like, and especially on a multi-tool of this size. Next to the knife blade, man, I'm not accustomed to this style of multi-tool. You have to bear with me as I fumble through here to get these tools opened and closed. So on the other side, we have a 1/4 inch flat driver, which looks quite robust. And again, all these screwdrivers are made really thick on their spines too, so they lends themselves to being quite strong. Then we have a 2-dimensional Phillips, or flattened Phillips driver. This one, I would prefer that they had you know, I don't mind necessarily that multi-tools don't have bit exchangers, but one thing I do like is those that don't. I would prefer that they integrate a full dimensional Phillips as opposed to these flattened Phillips. That's something I don't like. It's something I didn't like on the new Free series of tools from Leatherman. I just don't care for those flattened Phillips drivers. Now, if you're doing something that's cheaper like a Wingman, it's kind of okay. And honestly, I forgot to check what the price of the Gerber is of this diesel, what it runs, but still inherently I just don't care for that design. Then next to that we have an 1/8 inch, or yes, 1/8. I think I said the other one was 1/8 inch. It's actually 3/16. This is an 1/8 inch screwdriver, and that's a pretty decent screwdriver. My really only complaint about the flathead screwdrivers is that they really are kind of stubby and don't offer an incredible amount of reach. But that being said, the grind profiles on the screwdrivers are all very good and they should function just fine. And then the last tool on the interior is going to be a file. Now, this file is actually not that bad. It's a different kind of crosscut pattern that they put on here, and just running across it, I can tell that the crosscut here is actually decently aggressive. It's actually better than what I saw on their center drive. I like this pattern, or I like this file quite a bit more. I think I also like the fact that this is a pretty wide file, and so it allows a lot of surface area for filing. Now the other side is a fairly aggressive file as well, the single cut pattern on it. I wish I could test this to really see how well it performs compared to other Gerbers and against other multi-tools as well. But it appears that the Diesel has a very good pattern on its file as well. Well, gentlemen, that is the extent of the tool set and selection on the Gerber Diesel. I don't know a lot about the Diesel. I do know that a lot of people have kind of ragged on it, that they don't care for it that much. I inherently don't care for the design, and so it's not something that I personally would carry. Now, the benefit to those OTFs is that you can, well, I'm kind of limited on space here, and I'm not the greatest at that, but you can flip them out one hand, and that's what a lot of people like about the OTF plier design. It's not quite for me. It's not something that I need, but nonetheless, let me talk about what I think the best parts of this are and kind of what I kind of feel are the drawbacks to this Gerber Diesel. There's really three things that I think I like a lot on this multi-tool. First and foremost, and the most important I think, or the one I like the most, are the scissors. I think those scissors are really, really good. I think Gerber did an outstanding job on those scissors. And I like the fact that instead of a spring, it has the tension bar. They have good spring back, open up wide. The only thing that I don't care for about the scissor design is that the handle is not in line with the cutting surface, because that, when you're cutting through like cardboard and stuff, a little bit more rigid material will try to kind of land on that hump, and it just makes it a little harder to get through. Now these scissors do perform incredibly well, as I showed before, on paracord. On paper, cardboard, they're going to do just fine. The scissors are definitely a high point of this multi-tool. I think the file, I like it. I definitely like the fact that it's a little wider than some of the other multi-tools. I like the pattern on it. Now, not being able to go test it completely to find out just how good it performs, but I think it's going to do okay. I really do. I think that file is actually pretty good. Now, when it comes to the knife blade, what I still don't like half serrated blades. I'm never going. I don't think they're ever going to come a point where they're going to grow on me enough that I would recommend a half serrated blade. What I do like about this knife blade is twofold. I love the little spear point up here, the way that's ground, and I love the sharpness level that they put on this multi-tool. Sometimes from Gerber, it can be a little hit or miss with their knife blades. Some of their knife blades come out really, really good, and then others really kind of leave a lot to be desired. The knife blade on the Diesel though, very, very, very sharp, very good blade. And especially, you know, so many times you could use a piercing function on your blade, and I think I like it. I don't know how well that, you know, that's going to perform. You know what? Just looking at it, just the little bit that I did with it, I think it's going to do great on stuff like rope too, for the serrated portion. I just wish that they had a standard full-length blade, and I wish the blade length on this was a bit longer as well. Now, some of the criticisms to the Gerber Diesel, first and foremost, is going to be in the pliers. Now, while the pliers themselves are not bad, I was really, really disappointed in the wire cutting capability, because I really thought that that longer length was going to lend itself to being better wire cutters than I've seen on other Gerber models. Unfortunately, we saw earlier that it just does not have the same capability for wire cutting as we've seen from other Gerber models, and so I was very disappointed in that. The next thing I don't like, and this is going to be true of most OTFs, is the amount of play in the plier heads. I just have never, ever liked that play that you get without the front pliers. Some people, it's not going to matter. To me, it makes the tool feel cheaper than what it actually is. There seem to be fairly robust pliers, but that movement is just, I just don't like the design, I guess is what it boils down to. But if you do, then it may not be an issue for you. And the last thing that I think is kind of, well, actually there's two things, and it goes back to that what we mentioned before. That is that because this is an OTF design, the grip angle on here is not to my liking, and that's probably being a little picky. It's just my personal preference. The last thing that I don't necessarily care for, and only because this is a large frame multi-tool, is the fact that the screwdrivers are very stubby in this by comparison to other large frame multi-tools. Now, if this was a standard duty size, it'd probably be a non-issue for me, but I think that they're a little short. And again, that's going to go back to that OTF design and why I just don't care for it. It's just not my cup of tea, because it takes away from features like that. You get longer implements, or in some cases like in Leatherman they use bit exchangers, but you have the ability to get longer screwdrivers, longer knife blades, longer saws, files, etc. Wherein the OTF design, you just don't get that. On the whole, without having the ability to really put this through any kind of hard use, I think the Gerber Diesel is going to fall into, I hate to bring it down to a B+, but I think that's where it's going to land for me. I just don't think it's going to have the same capability as some of those of the other multi-tools that I've tested against. I wanted to give it an A-, but I just don't think it's quite there. I think there's too many things that, not necessarily flaws, but just drawbacks for me that bring the Diesel down into a B+ for me. Well, my name is Ben, and you've been watching the Texas Tool Crib, and this has been my review of the Gerber Diesel. Hope you've enjoyed it. If you did, please hit the thumbs up button, and I will see you in the next one.